have been turkey bacon. If it was, no offense.
Nobody checked.
Nobody checked. So he demanded an investigation, and that didn't go anywhere because there wasn't anywhere to go.
No.
Because this is all a setup. It's done all over the country in the very same way. Let me give you another example. Rochester, Red Lobster, you had a problem.
Yeah.
I solved that problem because similar cases were being filed in California against restaurants, cookie cutter cases, all about how we have been so mistreated, and therefore you must pay restitution, you must apologize publicly, like in the Valley, the Screamtown thing in Chaska recently, and he was a fool for doing that, but the owner. And you must go through sensitivity training. And we get to choose, Jaylani and the boys get to choose who the counselors are going to be that are going to conduct that sensitivity training, okay? Well, I just happened to be visiting my son at UW La Crosse when I heard about the story days earlier, so I thought, I was coming back on a Sunday morning, and I thought I'd swing by and visit. The manager, ironically, his name is Christian, nice guy. And I was dressed kind of like something the cat dragged in and kicked back out again. So, but I stopped by for a beer and my usual, which is raw oysters. And I sat at the bar just as they were opening, and I asked to speak to the manager. And he came over and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "I got a story to tell you about a group in California that just won a 2-year lawsuit against the Council on American Islamic Relations." Then I read the story about what happened with you folks. Looks really familiar. As Yogi Berra used to say, it's like deja vu all over again. And he looks at me like I got 3 heads, because he's, from around here. It's like, wow, who's this guy? And I explained some of my background, and I said, look, you're being had, you're being played. And so he said, what do you mean? I said, well, number one, I trust that none of your employees have offended anyone, and that everybody that comes through the door, if they're not belligerent and a pain in the neck, gets treated very well. He said, well, yeah. I said, I know, because I used to run restaurants 1,000 years ago. For 10 years I did that. I said, I have a suggestion for you. I'm going to connect you up with the legal foundation that took on the case in California that won the lawsuit relative to the restaurants that were being set up there. Same thing. Same old, same old. He said, really? I said, yeah. So I sent him a boatload of information by email. And I followed up, asked him if he received it. I said, please pass it on to the powers that be. Don't knuckle into this stuff, otherwise you're done. I mean, they will be back. It'll be worse next time. So about a week and a half or 2 ago, after that, I happened to be at a Red Lobster in Bloomington, and I was just shooting the breeze with a friend of mine, 2 friends of mine, about this incident in Rochester. And I explained what had happened, and the bartender overheard what we were talking about and said, really, did that? Oh, yeah. And so 5 minutes later, this woman comes out, and she said, she must have got the message wrong. She comes out, she says, can I help you? Did you have a problem with the lobster? I went, no, just the opposite's true. I explained the whole deal. I feel like I'm explaining it. I'm in the Arlo Guthrie thing about Alice's restaurant here, but that's okay. So I explained the whole thing. She said, you're kidding. And about, I don't know, 3 minutes later, 3 guys come around the corner with suits, tall guys. They're from Orlando. They're from the home office. They wanted to hear the story about the California group. And so I shared it with them. And then I explained that I'd sent Christian here, the manager, all the information he needed to choke a horse and to put a stop to this intimidation, to a purpose. Now, Amazon out of Egan, they were dumb enough to fall for it. And here come the picket signs. We need special treatment during Ramadan because we're so weak, because we don't eat right, we don't drink right, we don't take care of ourselves. So you have to hire temps to take our place while we go sit in the shade. They fell for that. I said, don't do that. It's like the guy says, doctor, hurts when I do that. Well, you don't do that anymore. So, anyway, so they did listen to me. And it was about 3 weeks later, there was a story. The Orlando group said no to CARE and Jailani Hussein. They count on you backing up. They count on you. They count on submission as part of the thing called takia. 3 different phases of it. It's either by the schmooze, by the hard persuasion, or by the sword. And I'm not kidding. Good example. These guys in Minneapolis are still wanted. Armed and dangerous. And the FBI, when I call them periodically, about once every 2 months, will tell me, we can't talk about an open investigation. Still open. This guy, 87-year-old guy, for the second time in the last 9 years, last year, he was arrested for serial child rape because it's part of the culture of insanity. The last time he got, and he was, let's see, he's 87 now, so he was 78 then. He got 20 years probation. 20 years probation for a 79-year-old. Let's see, I'll do the math. Seriously? There was a young man who came here from Somalia it was 2 years ago, September, up in Crookston. He at knife point in December, 3 months after he got here from their happy homeland, of course. At knife point, on a Jefferson Line bus, he rapes a woman in the back of the bus and beats her. How he got away with it without the driver knowing, who knows? He got 60 days. In the end, after 8 months of fooling around in the court, that's the other problem of the courts, kind of going, 20 years probation? And you can hardly find any news about this guy now. Reason? They don't want you to know. You have to go searching through the court records and files to even find out if it's even going to trial. Then we have these 2 cherubs. This is May 25th, 2017, and my buddy Leo Holman, formerly with WorldNet Daily, wrote this article. Minnesota Muslim released despite grenade bomb materials found. North Minneapolis. Can't make this one up. These boys were in a van. And this guy was caught in December of the prior year with an unlicensed, unregistered handgun for which he had no business. And they're both from Texas. Go figure. Then his brother and he, in May of the following year, last year, is that right? Yep. May 2017. They're in North Minneapolis in a van. An old man comes out complaining about the fact that they're throwing trash out of their van while just sitting there in North Minneapolis. So the guys get out, they threaten to shoot the man. He calls 911 because he's taking down their license plate number. About your law enforcement idea.
I remember this story.
Yeah. So the cops come, Minneapolis PD show up. They surround the van with vehicles. They tell them to get out of the van. These guys are so belligerent, they say to them, well, they want them to get away from the van. No, we can't because we're waiting for a drone delivery.
What? Yep.
Yeah.
Waiting for drones.
They had a hand grenade. They had thousands of rounds of ammunition, AK-47, multiple handguns. And the question is, what are you doing here? Don't know anything about this now anymore either. Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman. Where are they now? Justine Damon is shot to death. Oh, this is the Islam 101 presentation at the Minnesota History Center where Mr. Hussein called me a racist. He's my favorite. Anyway, Justine Damon, 40-year-old Australian-born woman, shot to death by Officer Noor It's finally gonna go to trial, I think, next April. They were gonna bury that story. Her father was being interviewed on Channel 5 News about Rudsick, I think his last name is. It was gut-wrenching to watch. I went to her memorial service at Lake Carrillo, the band shell, in August of last year. And he was not scheduled to speak, but and I was about to leave. Australian News was there, everybody was there, with the exception of Keith Ellison, Amy Klobuchar, the usual suspects. Our comatose governor shows up with Tina Smith. They sneak in the front just about the beginning of the program. Nobody can see them except me. And this guy's presentation with regard to how painful it was to have lost his daughter to a rogue cop who had failed the pre-entrance exam 3 times. I know because I know the people involved. 3 times before he even got into the fast track training program. They try to bury that too. And I keep reminding people, she, to my knowledge, is still dead. Shot to death by an unstable man that only, a political hire, that only because of his skin tone and national origin is this man given a gun and a badge and a license to kill. The following month, in August, she was killed July 15th. Early August, we have another Somali cop who is sworn in, kid you not, sworn in, and on the day he's sworn in, he's arrested. Reason? He threatened to shoot his wife because they really respect women. Shoot his wife in the head and laughed about the fact that he could get away with it. Reason? Because Officer Noor appeared to be getting away with it. They even tried to turn her into the assailant. They tried to make him the victim. And I'm telling you, and this guy's disappeared. The officer who spent 1 day on the force and maybe riding a desk, we don't know, or he's on the coop and he's in another territory.
But you know, that whole story has never made sense from day one. The lady calls.
Compared to what?
Well, I'm just saying, they said there was an assault, and the news said they drove through and never stopped. If someone calls something in, why wouldn't they? It never made, I'm former law enforcement. It's never made sense to me that you had a call, and they never went to the woman's home and said, you made a call, are you the one that made the call?
The driver was also a rookie cop, 1 year on the force.
The powder burns across his chest.
That's not my, yeah.
Imagine
his shot.
I can't imagine the guy shooting across my chest and then doesn't want to say anything and says, I got powder burns on my chest because you shot across my chest through the door at the woman that we should have stopped at the house and found out why she pounded on the back thing because she's pissed off because she called something in and no one's taking her.
She was armed with her cell phone and dressed in her pajamas. That does it for me. I'll go one step further. We had 3 arson attempts. You were in law enforcement. 3 arson attempts just in the last year and a half. One at St. Kate's, 8 fires set trying to burn the place down. One of the fires set right next to a nursery. St. Paul Cathedral, on the same morning that this supposed bombing occurred, this firebomb occurred at the Bloomington Mosque, wink, wink, nod, nod. Same morning, guy tries to burn down St. Paul Cathedral. Then, after it was this past spring, St. Cloud, and Mayor Kleiss knows me really well because he was Senator Kleiss at the time I was serving my penance at the Capitol for 10 miserable years. But he and I've had conversations up close and personal. I've given him a book entitled No-Go Zones, because we have those now. He hasn't even opened up the cover, is my bet. Asked Paul, as opposed, over the objections of one Jeff Johnson, the city councilman, not the gubernatorial candidate, who wanted to initiate a moratorium relative to all this stuff, a time out. They then shoot him down completely, and then they declare, as part of the Welcoming Cities program, they declare St. Cloud a welcoming and just community. That's their solution to the problems in St. Cloud and Wake Park. And that place is under siege. That place is a mess. just like Wilmer. Apparently, the guy who tried to blow up City Hall this past spring didn't get the message. Didn't get the memo. We're a welcoming and just community. The quote in the paper was from him, "I boot to blow you up." He said gas cans all around City Hall in St. Cloud, trying to blow the place up. And still they're going, problem? Is there a problem here? The mall attack in St. Cloud. I was in that mall that same day, headed to an Amtrak trip to the West Coast. The rape attacks, MCTC, and there have been several of them. Woman is attacked in Metropolitan State Community Technical College, or whatever they call it, downtown Minneapolis. She's trapped in a bathroom with this guy. While smoking a pipe full of pot, he then tries to rape her. And then when the cops get there, one female cop from Minneapolis PD, he threatens to rape her too. This is a rape-happy culture, by the way. It's a problem. And the biggest problem, and by the way, everybody know who Chuck Schumer is? CARE, according to Chuck, back in whatever day it was, CARE has ties to terrorism and intimate links with Hamas, says Senator Chuck Schumer. CARE, its leaders and its activities effectively give aid to international terrorist groups. Stephen Pomerantz, former FBI counterterrorism guy. They all know what's going on. They just don't have the courage to do anything about it. One of the problems that we face in Minnesota is that law enforcement and the courts are afraid now. Afraid of lawsuits. How many, I'll give you one good example. And we filmed this stuff, which makes him, Jaylani Hussein, nuts. In Stillwater, at this presentation, last April, we sat in the front row. Me and my co-producer and about 12 of us. The reason we were there that Sunday afternoon is that the Understanding the Threat tour, which was in Des Moines, Pewaukee, Wisconsin, Green Bay, Bloomington, Minnesota, and La Crosse. All except for Des Moines, they were all shut down because of threats against them by the Southern Poverty Law Center, Antifa, and CARE. So we decided on that day to go pay him a visit in Stillwater. And as David Letterman used to say, this wasn't real, could I do this? So we went to pay him a visit. We sat in the front row. We filmed it. And we caught everything he had to say, plus his PowerPoint presentation, on film. Drives him nuts, which is my intent, while smiling at him. 10 years ago, CARE filed 5 lawsuits in the state of Minnesota. Take a wild guess as to how many they filed in 2017. 360. I said that to the police commander the other day, Monday, this week, in St. Paul about my incident at the church. He said, "You've got to be kidding." He said, "Oh my God." I said, "Yeah." And with great pride, Jaylani Hussein tells everyone in the audience, we expect to exceed that number by 20% this year. Red Lobster.
You never finished the story on Red Lobster. What are the 3 businessmen that were from there?
They're from Orlando, home office.
Well, you never finished the story, so what finished?
Well, no, I'll finish it again. They listened with intensity, especially because of my oddball delivery style about the whole thing. And I was dressed pretty much like this again. And I said to them, you either face this, and I've said this to Tom Emmer, who's known me since 2005. I wouldn't vote for Tom Emmer for dog catcher. Ever again.
You mentioned the Hennepin County Sheriff. He's been in town here campaigning. What's he running for?
He's just running for his life. Rich Stanek is a turncoat. He's a sellout. And 7 years ago, he was testifying in front of Congress back in DC about the issue of the Somali gang problem. He was trying to tell them about, we need help here. Today, complete about face. He will he will enforce this. He will enforce it.
Has he, usually when people do that, they've got something on them, so therefore the reason they turn is because they've done something probably not so upright and they know about it, so they want
It runs deeper than that. We have done stories that nobody else, and I'm talking about third rail talk, nobody else will touch. Just in the last 4 months, and it's making them all crazy. The US Bank Viking Stadium scandal in August this year. Bingo. We got them, we nailed them. They had a website that they set up. It was called the Super E program. They'd done it before at the Minneapolis Convention Center, but it was always, 1,500, 2,000 people. Their website that was set up in July, and it takes a year to set up anything at the US Bank Stadium. They need that much preparation time. It was nowhere in the marquee, nowhere to be seen anywhere. It was hidden from the public until we blew the whistle on it. On their website, the Super E thing, set up in July, domain name set up the day before, they indicated they had 50,000 tickets. 50,000 people, 2 days in a row. That's what they expected. Who knew about it? Nobody. Law enforcement didn't know either. And Mike Beckich, the chair of the, what do they call it, the Metropolitan Sports Facility Council, we talk about people in authority, he was hiding. He attended John Gondola's presentation in St. Paul 3 weeks earlier. I was there, about understanding the threat. The same program that was shut down in Bloomington, across Green Bay, and so on. He attended that presentation. I've seen John's presentation 3 times. It's compelling. You can't ignore it because it's all about really understanding what's going on here. FBI guy, counterterrorism background, etc. Mike Beckich was in that audience. I saw him and a couple of other plants. He went back knowing that this was going to happen. He did nothing. Nothing. He let it just unfold until we showed up the Friday before in front of their council, including, I'm trying to think, Perpich. I think one of the Perpich people were there on the council. And we scared the snot out of them. There were like 15 of us. Nobody ever shows up at these things at the stadium. We did, filmed it, and asked him some tough questions. And he said, "You've got 2 minutes and there's no Q&A." So I did my best Forrest Gump. Okay. And I stood there, I went up to and the guy before we got to talking was the events manager who refused to return my phone calls for 2 weeks. And Patrick Talty, I think his name is. And he's going through the PowerPoint presentation with all the events that are just about to take place in the next year or two. And it took 6 months to do this, 12 months to do that. This one, no notice at all. So I could see that he wasn't going to do anything about the problem and let this sneak up on people. So I lit him up on Monday morning. And this thing started on Wednesday morning. And I wrote him an email citing professional misconduct, professional and personal liability, and talking about his duty to inform the public about 50,000 people sneaking up on him, which would then erupt into the Mall of America, where there have been stabbings, and sexual assaults, and all that stuff. And I said to him, I am going to personally make sure that you're held responsible for any problem that occurs. I'm going to make this nationally public, which I did. And we bounced it off the national news networks. They bid on it. And then it bounced back to Minneapolis or Minnesota. And it was a miracle. Monday morning, an hour and a half after I pressed send on the email, there's a press conference right in front of the US Bank Stadium with a whole bunch of news people who were just curious, CCO, KSDP, Channel 11, you name it, they're all there. It's a miracle. They're all interested now. And you've got like 8 Somali elders doing what I call the Somali babble, which makes no earthly sense to anybody. But they talked and talked and talked about it. Esme Murphy reports, and it starts the following morning at 6:30, according to the schedule, in the morning. Until that point, no one knew. That's disgraceful. That's dangerous, and that's what I pointed out to Mike Vackich. That's dangerous. 50,000 people, I said to Mike, after the meeting was over on Friday, before this happened, where are they gonna go? They gonna stay in the building? No, they're not going to go. Well, it starts at 6:30, it ends at 11:30. Who's gonna do the security sweep in the building after they're gone? He said, well, I don't know what you're implying. I said, I can say it slower for you. He says, that's not funny. I said, well, it's a little funny. Who is going to chase these people out if they don't want to go? And Super Eat is all about the sacrifice of it's been a couple of months. They sacrifice animals. They skin them alive. Turn them upside down, skin them alive, and that's how they, purify their animals. This is 7th century stuff. So they assured everybody in the news they weren't going to skin any animals inside the stadium, but maybe off-site somewhere else at an undisclosed location. Jaylani Hussein calls the Minneapolis PD in the afternoon before the thing starts at 6:30 in the morning and says, we need security. It's a miracle. It's the first time the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport knew about it, the police authority. Well, me, the PD didn't know. I know because I spoke to a police commander saying, gird your loins, because right on the light rail system, here they come to the Mall of America, just like they did 2 years ago, Stampede, 1,000 people. No notice. Rampage through the mall. It's still up. You can catch it on YouTube. Scared the hell out of people, and rightly so. Took over what used to be laughingly called Camp Snoopy when I used to be a chaperone for my kids when they were attending school at Minnehaha Academy. No longer. It's dangerous. Another place my kids and grandkids will not go again, ever, just like Valley Fair. The problem is denial. The problem is this kind of thing is being ignored. Except by me and a few other people who are interested, like Bradley Dean Smith and Sons of Liberty Radio. The other problem is, this is the consequence. Really, denial is dangerous. The other thing I haven't talked about, I'm trying so hard not to beat you up tonight, but I'm not doing a very good job of it. And by the way, Jaylani sneaks into other churches just to observe if someone who is making a presentation, another kind of pastor is suggesting, don't buy it. So he sneaks into churches in Cambridge, Minnesota. He got caught though. And I love this. This is priceless. Esme Murphy, she interviewed Ilhan Omar. They both share the same attorney, so Esme, in her infinite wisdom as a broadcast journalist, decides to interview Ilhan to ask her about questions relating to Keith Ellison. Go figure. Here's the other problem. Female genital mutilation. FMG. It's 7th century brutality. It's also not only unsafe, unsanitary, but it also creates a myriad of other problems that have to be repaired at taxpayer cost, by the way, of these little girls who are mutilated. Another article. This is true. One of my associates, his name is Professor John Palmer, Professor Emeritus, St. Cloud State University. His presentations are as dry as toast, but he's brilliant. He did an analysis of the communicable diseases in Minnesota. We have an 80% share of the measles outbreak for the entire country right here in Minnesota. 80% in pockets all over Minnesota. In the same areas, we have active tuberculosis. Gee, what a shocker. He identified through the Minnesota Department of Health and their statistical database, just active tuberculosis diagnosed between 2012 and 2015 alone, 747 cases of active tuberculosis throughout the state of Minnesota. 740. Do you know how communicable that is? How catchy that is? Back to my question, how many body bags and hospital beds have to be filled before Minnesotans wake up? Then, the other 18 diseases having been identified by CDC, not only with regard to the refugee resettlement program, folks, but also I'm sure you're familiar with the caravan coming up from Central and South America. 20 diseases, many of them we've not seen in this country for 150 years. And they're stampeding toward the United States, and by way of the sanctuary city public policy, if Mr. Ellison becomes Attorney General, this becomes a sanctuary state.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Minneapolis is St. Paul and a number of other cities in Minnesota. Then we're done. That's as much as I can ruin your evening, except to say this guy is real, and he has 9 other friends just like him. How many people are familiar with rules for radicals? You mentioned the red-green axis.
Yeah.
Yep. By Saul Alinsky, a deplorable human being. There's a special place in Guess Where for him. Well, the companion piece relative to this issue is called Milestones. And you should read it. Short read, very enlightening. A longer read, and one of the people I've interviewed recently is Trevor Loudon from New Zealand. Brilliant. Worth, it's a short read, not so much, but worth every minute to read it. Another book, talk about the red-green axis. Back in Hitler's day, it was the Turks and the Grand Mufti. In fact, my dad fought in North Africa against stormtroopers who were the Turks. They were dressed up in Nazi stormtrooper uniforms, and Hitler had a particular name for them that was a particular kind, but basically cannon fodder. So this has been going on a long time. Now we have the red-green axis between, this is written by Jay Sekulow, Unholy Alliance, the Russians. The objective, destroy the United States, one way or another. And another read that is, oh, by the way, I haven't talked about one of our other stories. Oh, and I love this one. Trevor Loudon and Spencer are so hated by Ellison. Ellison had the nerve to write Jeff Bezos with Amazon and demanded, because he is, after all, himself, Mr. Ellison, demanded that Jeff Bezos take down all these books, burn these books, Trevor Loudon's books, Robert Spencer's books, any kind of paraphernalia relating to his view of anything anti-Islamic, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure he's still waiting for the response from Mr. Bezos. I would hope. Robert Spencer's book, Complete Infidel's Guide to Free Speech. I made a joke earlier, I heard it last night on Sean Hannity's program. Dennis Prager was being interviewed along with Alan Carrillo, I think his last name. He's a comedian. And they were paraphrasing what's his name? Gosh, it was a comedian, a Russian comedian. And he said, we have about free speech. We have free speech in Russia. The difference between Russia and the UK is we have free speech in Russia and in the United States, not the UK, the United States. In the United States, we have free speech and you get to live. Ashes to Glory, Pastor Ramin Parza, one of my favorite projects. Pastor Parza was here in, well, let me back up. He's internationally famous. He was part of an Aeromexico, excuse me, airline crash in Mexico on July 31st this year. He is credited with saving 91 passengers and crew, not only with prayer. He's born in Iran, converted to Christianity. He serves as a Christian pastor in California. He was here to present at a local Hispanic Christian church in August. On July 31st, this man was a hero internationally for saving all the passengers. He ripped the door off the plane. You should see the plane. It's a miracle. And they all said that anybody survived, let alone everybody on that plane. Pastor Parsa then comes to Minnesota, puts on a presentation at a local church. The local pastor, and his 14-year-old son and Pastor Parsa go to the Mall of America because he's never seen it before. Shorts, sandals, no clerical garb at all. He gets arrested. 2 Somali women, and his accent attracted him to them. The way he looks, he's 32 years old. They engaged him and wanted to, because the 2 pastors just happened to be talking as they were waiting to go into Starbucks at the Mall of America. And they engaged him, wanted to know, why did he convert? You must be Muslim. No, I'm Christian. I'm a Christian pastor, he told them. So they wanted to know why. So they were curious, these 2 young ladies. And obviously he's a handsome guy, so there's that attraction. A 3rd Somali woman comes over and starts berating everybody, beating up on the pastor verbally, as well as the 2 girls. They exchange words, the 2 women, and the 3rd one tell him that they asked him, etc. They're defending the pastor. She takes off. She went and got mall security, who I've engaged personally, to find out that every word of his story is true. They tried to arrest me too for doing this. Can I ask you a question? In any event, he and the other pastor and the young man go into Starbucks. They disengage because the security guy came out and said, you can't talk about Christianity in the mall, period. And, can't make this up. And you can't solicit. They're in shorts and sandals. They said, well, the girls wanted to talk to us. You have to cease and desist, or we'll have to ask you to leave. They both said, oh, okay. So they took off. They went to Starbucks. They're in there for half an hour. Mall cop stands out there talking to people, and they're in there for about a half an hour. The 3 of them get up. They're going to take a stroll. Come out. There's 3 mall cops. Now they arrest him. They tell him he's under arrest. They escort the other pastor and the child out of the building to the parking lot, which they did to me too about 4 days after that, for doing nothing except just to ask some questions. And so they take him to mall cop prison. In the basement, they shackle him to they also put handcuffs on him behind his back in the mall. The other pastor has no idea where he's going. They take him to the basement. They shackle him to a steel chair bolted to the floor, at which point they keep him there for 2 hours and 2 hours and 15 minutes. Won't give him water, won't give him a bathroom break. And they try to barter water for a picture because they want to put him on the terror watch list. That's true. They won't call Bloomington PD. They won't adhere to his request for an attorney. They keep him there. It started at 7:30 in the evening. By the time Bloomington PD showed up, they took the report. They take him to the Bloomington Police Department. They book him and release him on a 70, and he never gets the chance to talk to an attorney. No Miranda rights, nothing. I know. It's what I did. It starts at 7:30 in the evening. It ends at 1:30 in the morning. The other pastor is fine. Then they finally give him a phone call. The other pastor comes and picks him up. The criminal case has been $78 bail. He lives in California. They're going to force him to come back here. Have a local attorney through
What's the charge?
Oh, criminal trespass.
How can it be criminal if did they ask him to leave?
No, they didn't. They threatened to ask him to leave if he didn't stop. Well, he stopped.
You need to get a good attorney.
He already has a great attorney. We got him one through a legal defense fund, and they're gonna, plus, I also have great connections with the organizations. Some of you may be familiar with, and that's Judicial Watch out of DC. They've investigated lots of stuff I've thrown their way. Judicial Watch, without being asked, has contacted me just in the last couple of days and asked, is he going to be represented in the civil rights portion of this situation? I said, no. Would you like us to do it? Yep. And that's what's going to happen. He's got a great lawyer here who's going to take care of the criminal issue. In fact, they go to the hearing, not pastor, he doesn't have to, but the attorney will, on election day, November 6th. I will be there. Just so much, because I like
people.
Huh?
People.
But my point, and then I'm going to end with this, take any questions you might have. But this kind of stuff, and this is his book, From Ashes to Glory. He's a great man, good guy, solid guy. And by the way, he suffers from PTSD because he has been tortured in his home country of Iran, tortured in Turkey, just for leading his ministry there as well as in the United States. When all of this broke relative to our breaking the story on the national scene, because the local people wouldn't touch it, his family in Iran have been arrested for having violence. So that's what we're up against here. And we're also up against, well, the mainstream media here is awful. Law enforcement, afraid and uninformed, many of them, not all of them. And people are unaware. And so I'm begging, in fact, that you do your level best to do what you're talking about doing, and that's getting involved. Questions, anybody? Yeah.
Before everybody leaves, would you share with us where are the no-go areas in Minnesota?
Well, one is the Minneapolis Cedar Riverside area, and they have a no-go area I said that to Mayor Kleiss, in St. Cloud, and also Wake Park. Wilmer is a mess. There are places there you can't go. Faribault, I think there are 20,000 people down there. But I meant to share something with you very briefly, and I didn't get to that. And that's the very reason I got involved with this in the first place. And I will find it if it kills me. I used to just comment on Facebook about one thing and another. And I came home from a business trip September of last year. And I was presented with, I think I've destroyed my stuff here. I was presented with a note on my door. And I live in the country in St. Michael. Hard to find me. I came home on a Friday night, had been gone for 5 days, took my German Shepherd out in the dark and put him away, and in the following morning came outside and happened to notice this note on the door. And in vertical cut and paste, vertical words, it said, "We see you on Facebook." And I didn't even report it initially, until about 3 weeks later, my shepherd set off my alarm by beating me to the front door. And I was greeted by a Wright County sheriff, a large guy, bigger than me, on my front porch in front of my kitchen window. I happen to turn around, I see this huge man doing this. So because I am nervous about or aware of my surroundings, always. So I came to the door, and the sheriff came in, and he said, "Your alarm went off." I said, "I didn't know that. I didn't hear anything." He said, "Well, is everything okay?" And he asked for my ID. I presented it to him, and I said, "I apologize." And he loved my dog because he's gorgeous. And He really is. And I said, I'm sorry I reacted the way I did, because, and he saw my handgun on my island. And I said, I have a carry permit. And he said, I thought you would. He said, but why were you so startled? I said, well, I received a note on my door about 3 weeks ago. Explained it. He said, did you report it? I said, no. I didn't see any point. He said, well, do you mind if I write up a report? I said, sure. And he did. And he said, can I have a copy of it? I said, sure. He said, look, when you leave town, because I travel for business, this is not what I do, by the way. This isn't my career. Some people collect baseball cards and stamps. This is what I do. Anyway, he said, well, when you leave town, let us know. You have a sheriff right down the street. I said, yeah, I've seen a squad car before. Let us know if you're going to be out of town for 2, 3, 4 days, that kind of thing. That's what started me on this path. And that's what caused me to go to the St. Cloud Public Library to see Jaylani Hussein the first time with the Japanese American group. When I left that room, and I did not say a word, I did not have a camera, I had nothing that day. I was there with some people I knew. And I watched him berate women who asked him tough questions about CARE's connection with Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood. Will you disavow that connection, et cetera? And he would not do that. And then he stood up there and he said, in a fit of anger, he stood there, and as he was just about to make his last speech, 8 Somali men, about that tall, all dressed in dark clothing, walked in single file at the end of a 2-hour presentation, positioned themselves in the back of the room and at the corners like the Praetorian Guard. I stood up and took notice and smiled, didn't say anything. And then he says to the crowd, we will not be intimidated, we will not be silenced, and we now carry a big stick. He was angry. That did it. So that is why I am here. I have children and grandchildren to protect. And frankly, I have lived here 47 years. I love Minnesota, but if it keeps going the way it's going, I'm out of here. And my kids, my son's already in lacrosse, drilling down roots permanently. And after the scare at Valley Fair, my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandchildren, I tried to get my grandson to go back, and granddaughter to go back to Valley Fair with me. I said, I'll go with you. Because when they told me the story, my grandson, who's 10 years old, said, Grandpa, what are you going to do about this? He said, what do you mean? He says, well, you do stuff. I said, well, yeah, I kind of do. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm doing some things, but I'd rather not talk about it right now, Ethan. And my kids and grandkids will follow me if I have to leave. Minnesota, and these are their own words at the US Bank Stadium, people, in an interview, you are being colonized.
Mhm.
That's what they said. The guy interviewing his own group of people, and he said, how does it feel to be colonizing the US Bank Viking Stadium in Minnesota? Colonizing. So who asked the question about no-go zones? Everywhere. Cedar Riverside, they're building a wall around it.
I had a question very closely related to that, and I'm concerned about Rochester in particular.
I would be too.
As we think about Rochester and our neighborhoods, what would be, I'm gonna call it infiltration. What is the pattern of infiltration for which we're looking for? Because I do not believe until we see something tangible, this group does, but most of us, until we see something tangible, like a no-go zone, are going to start understanding what's happening. So what is,
Well, I can tell you the beginning of it.
please?
All right. Walter Hudson, anybody know him? Radio? iHeartRadio? It's called the, I call it the final curtain, but it's Closing Argument is his program. Walter is a radio guy every night, 2 hours, hates me. He won't go on air with me and debate or even have a conversation. He's afraid. Walter sees all of this and he claims to be a Republican. That's a joke. He claims that this is all about a comparative religions of the world conversation. Apparently, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about Islam at all. 1,400 years of misery. That's why there were the Crusades, the pushback. It starts with the code words, the dog whistle of affordable housing, low-income housing. As soon as that happens, here they come. I used to do this when I used to testify at the Capitol. We were talking about welfare reform at that time when I was serving down there. And I talked about Tommy Thompson next door, about workfare, and other states that were getting the message and the memo, the Welfare Reform Act of '96 that Mr. Clinton begrudgingly signed into law. And I used to do this when I testified on from Detroit, from Atlanta, from Chicago. And I used to tell people on radio, we are going to become the next Detroit if we're not careful. And that's before all of this. That was just the welfare problem.
That's a tie-in to what, you're asking about the affordable housing and about what's going on. The biggest proprietors of the flush of refugees is under the guise of Christianity. It's under the Roman Catholic Church. It's under the Lutheran social.
Oh, Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities.
Both of them are in tie, and I do not for the life of me, I am a devout Catholic. For the life of me and for Christ, I do not understand how the church is involved in this, and I have railed against our bishop in this diocese, and the bishop and the archbishop up in St. Paul. I do not know why they're in bed with these people and why they think it's important under the guise of Christianity.
For the same reasons, I was bounced out of that church last Wednesday. The St. John, the evangelist.
What I get when I talk to my pastors and people in this community in the Christianity, we need to have dialogue with these people and we need to understand them. I said, the only dialogue you need is that you're a Christian and there's nothing else. You don't need to dialogue with Satan.
Well,
And there's nothing that you can gain from dialoguing with these people
But you
because they are
can't-
not dialogue people.
you cannot convince these people that that's exactly what they are doing. My conversation with the pastor with St. John's last Monday, I was very nice, very polite. But I said, there was a thing called the Trojan horse years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, been in all the papers.
It's why the Crusades happened, just what you just
Exactly.
said.
But,
And
but
nobody wants to allow that to happen because the minute you start fighting back and talking about it, and I'm tired of being quiet about it, I'm tired of being nice about it. You're up there and saying, I'm smiling at these people, well, I'm pissed off. And I think we need more people to be pissed off.
well,
In
I get what you're saying.
the zealousness of what Christ did in the temple.
I learned something, however, not to interrupt, sorry, but I learned something years ago when I was doing my thing at the Capitol. And that is that the more reserved and quiet I was, the crazier the other side got. The more I refused to give up my ground, the crazier they got. The more I smiled at them when they were trying to force me to give up their ground, give up my ground, the crazier they got. Jailani Hussein taking this kind of a step and locking arms with someone that is promoting a book about the resurgence of the KKK and how that links up to the Islamophobia industry, that's me. Now we're in the insane lane. So,
I'm not saying in the matter of being I'm saying the zealousness needs to be there, and we need to act on things.
but you have to remain,
But you need to remain focused, you need to remain in Christ and in that zealousness, because that's
let me share with you 2 lines from movies, because I'm a movie fanatic. One of those is a movie entitled Hoosiers. And one of the coaches says, it's one thing if a guy runs out in that cornfield, takes off all of his clothes and howls at the moon, kind of ignore them. If he does the same thing in my living room, I kind of have to take notice. I agree with that. And I'm taking notice. They're in my living room. And they're in your living room also. The problem that we face, though, is if we get too about it, then we play right into their hands, because then we look like, then we look like the very same thing that is reflected badly in this police report from last Wednesday, and the officer was kind enough to write it up properly. Then we play into their hands, and they got you. So remaining calm and collected, and, you know, with a sick and twisted sense of humor like mine tends to work, because it makes them go crazy. And so I want them to behave that way, because it really, in the more out of control they appear, the more in control I am. I've been doing this a long time. Do I want to be here? No. I want to be fishing in Yakutat, Alaska right now with my friends who just came back with all that salmon. So that's all I have to say about this. Question?
Keeping in line with what Mike had said about the idea of things working its way into various churches and such, that type of,
Yeah.
that level of tolerance, which is really more of an invitation more than tolerance in certain situations. I believe, I submit that it all stems from the concept of political correctness.
Of course it does.
If political correctness is another form of telling people that you're afraid.
I asked Walter Hudson on radio, and this is how he was mistreating Philip Parrish in an interview. That's why somebody said, you got to listen to this thing. So and it's the first time I ever heard this guy. And I heard what he was doing to Philip, a good guy. And so I called in, and I was surprised to get past the screener when I said, look, I have a question for Walter. He said, what's the question? I'd like him to tell me where, he's on the whole planet, show me where this totalitarian political ideology masquerading as a religion, and hiding behind our U.S. Constitution, the United States, and Bill of Rights. Show me where this is working anywhere in the whole planet. You've got the whole globe to choose from. Western Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia. Show me. He said, we don't have to go to the whole planet, everything. He starts screaming on air. He lost it. I said, well, okay, how about Dearborn, Michigan?
Wow.
Show me. That's where Keith Ellison comes from. So you have to present that kind of a question. Yes.
As they continue to attack our civic and religious holidays, or even fun ones like Halloween, I'm reminded that on the Arabian Peninsula 1,400 years ago, there was multiculturalism. There was vibrant multiculturalism. There was a diversity, a plethora of religions. There were Christian churches in the area now known as Saudi Arabia. There were Jewish temples, synagogues. There were Buddhists living there. There were Hindus. There were Zoroastrians. There were various pagan groups. And the monolithic, before Muhammad, BM, if you will, there was a plethora of cultures. And now there's just a monolithic culture. 100 years later, all those languages are gone. All those other civilizations, all those other worlds are gone. Then they come to Minnesota, and they in the guise of multiculturalism and diversity, they tell us, you must accept, you must celebrate
Or else.
Ramadan.
Well, I asked Jay Lonnie the same question, made him crazy. I make him crazy no matter what. I enjoy that. So I said to him, how many Christians and Jews are in Somalia?
Boom.
What do you think?
Right.
He looked at me, he said, I don't understand. I said, I'm going to ask it slowly.
Yeah.
Zero. So you come here and ask Linda Sarsour, the radical Palestinian born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, who really ought to be in prison for sedition.
Sedition.
Yeah. who says, you must not assimilate. She's a hateful human being,
Mhm.
who is a pal of Ilhan Omar's, by the way.
Mhm.
This is what we're up against. This is about integration, this is about confiscation, and this is about domination. Pardon me, I feel like I'm a preacher or something. So that's what this is about.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you complain, is criticizing Islam a form of mental illness? I say no. And I vote no for this.
They're going to be doing that in the churches in Rochester in the next couple of weeks. There's
See,
a new
I'll be the
series
first-
of events.
I'll be
They've
the-
just started advertising.
Have they?
Yeah.
I'll be the first one to admit I have issues. When I do this to my kids, oh, it's Dad, oh, Dad, I have issues. I don't have this issue. I see this very clearly, and you should too, each one of you, and do your level best to stand up with a smile on your face and fight back, because it's costing us in more ways than one. Just the illegal immigration in Minnesota is costing Minnesota taxpayers on a net basis, net, of every dollar is put back into the system, $1 billion a year. It's a whole Viking stadium a year. That's the illegal immigration deal, which Keith Ellison supports, by the way. Then you have the refugee resettlement thing through Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, and all those programs, and that's burying us too. They get $2,200 a head for parachuting them in, and Grand Rapids is under siege as we speak, right now. They're trying to get them to sign the mayor's compact up there, and they're resisting, and they should. Beyond that, pardon me? Minnesota. Beyond that, yes, sir.
I gotta do one today. I listened to 89.1 Spring Valley Christian Station, BCY, and they were telling on there that the National Guard was putting out signs that said Happy Ramadan.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, it's
There
unconscionable.
are churches that are killing us.
Well, and on a different note, but connected to the military, you know who, what's his name? The guy that was released in Afghanistan for Bergdahl. Yeah, you know that I think 5 guys that were traded, they're back on the battlefield again? Yeah, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and, you know, in the words of Forrest Gump's mother, stupid is a stupid does. And that's what we're up against here in Minnesota. And right now, we're talking about self-defense. Yes, sir.
Part of the reason to answer this gentleman's question or concern about the Catholic Church is that there's a subtle strain of thinking in both the Catholic Church and Lutheran services that it's literally called population replacement, in which if we have more and more American people leave the church for whatever reason, leave the Catholic Church because of the pedophile thing, or Lutheran services, Lutheran Church going down, because it's just not as politically correct. The way to keep the church alive and vibrant is to bring refugees in here, and we will replace the population.
And good luck with that.
I agree with that.
So our group hug is better than anybody else's group hug around the globe where it hasn't worked, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, United Kingdom. They're suffering. Spain. No, that's nonsense. You can't assimilate with people who are not wanting to assimilate back. All my grandparents came here through Ellis Island. They came here for an opportunity. I wrote about it. There's a piece back there, I think somebody reprinted, entitled Jailani Hussein, Their Plan versus Our Country. You pick up a piece. That's what this is about. We have our U.S. Constitution, our country, our Bill of Rights. They want to replace that. They're not here to adhere to our system of governance. That's not their goal. Their goal is to confiscate and overwhelm and then dominate, either by the schmooze or by way of what they call the jizya, which is their tax welfare, in our case, forced welfare, or in the end, the sword. That's it. And you can't hug them out of it, you can't talk them out of it. And in the end, if you press them like I do Mr. Hussein, he reacts and overreacts by wanting to become violent. And I think what he did by having the police department there and security there to boot me out of that church for doing nothing was a form of assault. And I'm about to prove that to him in court. So he's in for a surprise. Sir?
You said it in a
Yep.
recording last week that I listened to on my computer. There's a mosque in Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis.
There is.
Are there other high schools that have mosques?
I don't know, but I know for a fact that there is one in Roosevelt. There's also a room 316 at the Capitol, and you can look it up online. It's supposed to be a traveling exhibit. It's not a traveling exhibit. It's been there for 2 years. It's a mosque inside one of our state office buildings. In fact, the state office building. Look it up online. You'll see it all there. In the foyer of the Star Tribune is a picture of Bill Hunt, a portrait. How sweet. I know, I'm all warm and fuzzy about that.
Not nice enough.
Sir?
You mentioned the charter schools and doing stuff with that. We have an Islamic charter school in Rochester with 99% Somali. How are they milking the system there? What are they?
Well, subsidize this, subsidize that. They're teaching Sharia law, which is against the law, within that school system. It's a public school, public dollars are going to.
There's no oversight on it.
Of course not.
Nobody checks on them.
No. And on November 6th or before, what I'm most afraid of when it comes to this election are people going from poll to poll and voting multiple times, kind of like Chicago, Mayor Daley Chicago, vote early, vote often, and nobody challenging them simply because they're wearing a burqa or a hijab.
You know, that school down he's talking about on 16th Street Southwest, they're doubling the size of it right now
Yes.
for another millions of dollars. That Minnesota Housing is part of it. And one of our senators right now in the city of Rochester, Minnesota, is supporting it.
Carla Nelson.
Yeah. And they now have 9 school buses. They just bought 5 more brand new Honda vans. And the MnDOT came in and said, you cannot operate those vans until you make them compliant with what MnDOT rules are for transporting people. They're trying to appeal that right now, but the vans are confiscated in a parking lot right now. I know where it's at until they get them compliant. They think they've got another 9, maybe more buses ordered to pick up the pace of what's going on right there in this part of Rochester. So what it is domination through intimidation. And wake up.
In an or else. In the or else is Jailani Hussein, Mr. 360 lawsuits last year alone. It'll be 380 to 400 this year alone. Will file a lawsuit. Now, I happen to know that CARE is being sued by an out-of-state, as we speak, an out-of-state legal foundation in conjunction with, they're suing the Minnesota Department of Education for that, about that mosque issue, and also trying to cram Sharia law into the curriculum. The pressure is coming from outside of Minnesota, not as much from inside, because everybody wants to go along to get along. Nobody wants to be seen like Scott Stillman, the whistleblower, as a pariah. This poor guy, he's done for in Minnesota. He knows it. They're planning on leaving. I don't blame him. And I wouldn't let anybody know where I was going, because he's told the truth. That's the problem too. So, by the way, I don't know whether you picked up, and this is a piece that I just love. Amy Klobuchar, Keith Ellison, Tom, all, terrible. I've known, like I said, I've known Tom since 2005. I supported him for the governor's race. I supported him for the with 2 votes of mine for Congress. I wouldn't touch it. He actually, this is no kidding, he actually worked for a George Soros organization called National Popular Vote.
Oh.
National Popular Vote's in touch, and so this is a Soros thing, just like the Secretary of State project, until we shut him down by exposing him way back then, in 2008 and 9. National Popular Vote's entire objective is to do away with the Electoral College. That would make New York, California, Chicago rule the country. We would have no electoral say, our country's done. Then it becomes Hillary's America.
Then they want to use electronic voting only, no paper ballot.
Yes, I heard a commercial done by Steve Simon, our Secretary of State, today about enhancing the vote. And I remember one election, I can't remember what year it was, we had 18,000 overvotes. That means more people voted, 18,000, than actually registered to
Are
vote.
you saying my daddy can't vote just because he's dead?
Use your own best judgment.
Okay.
Yeah. If you can prop him up and get him to walk like in Bernie's, what was Weekend at Bernie's, if you can prop him up and play some music and he dances along, then he gets to vote.
Well, that's what's called an absentee ballot.
Extremely absentee.
Because the paper was burned.
Yeah, and I remember when Mark Ritchie, during the election of Al Franken by 325 or 15 votes, and sadly, I interviewed Norm Coleman when he was running for Congress the first time. Good guy, way too timid. He should have challenged that big time. And he had the wrong attorney who was playing for the other team, sadly. But they ended up finding 1,900 illegal felons that had voted, a bunch of people that died, that were dead that voted, probably one of your relatives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so, and nobody challenged it. Nobody said, let's have a do-over or something. It's amazing. I have faith in the silent majority in Minnesota. Before the 2016 election, I caught wind of a story about Minnesota high schoolers. They did a mock election in Minnesota. And Mr. Trump won high schoolers by 2%. So I thought, I'm onto something here. So I contacted, and this is right after Mike Pence was chosen as his running mate. So I contacted people I know in Fort Wayne, Missouri Synod Lutheran type folks, who connected me up with the chief of staff for Mike Pence. And I called him up and I said, my name is, and I know this guy, and he asked me to give you a call, here's because why. And he laughed and I said, I'm calling you because I've got some good news for you and some bad news for you. The good news is Mike Pence is going to be the next vice president of the United States. The bad news is you're going to lose an incredible governor and a good man. He laughed and he said, oh yeah, so what's your point here? I said, well, in Minnesota, I noticed that they're going to Milwaukee and Michigan and some other places. I said, in Minnesota, the high schoolers voted for Mr. Trump. I think the high schoolers are smarter than the adults. And less corrupt. There's almost no voter fraud with those guys and gals. He said, what are you talking about? So I explained. He said, can you send me some articles? I said, I'm trying to get through to the Trump people in New York, but no way. He said, look, you get me everything you can. I'll get it to them. I said, do I have your word on that? He said, don't push it. I said, fine. I said, yeah, I'll get you all the articles and everything I can. So I received a phone call about 3 days later, and it was somebody with the Trump campaign out of New York, and we were speaking the same language. It was great to hear the accent and the attitude. And he said, did this really happen? I said, yeah, it did. He said, well, what would you like us to do? I said, stop him. Don't ignore Minnesota. I think you're maybe surprised. And it was about, he said, I'll work on that. It was about 4 or 5 days later, I got another phone call that they were coming to the Sun Country airline hangar with the Trump plane. And it was like 3 days notice before the election. They showed up on a Sunday, the election was on Tuesday. 25,000 people showed up with no notice. The hangar was, I got a special spot because it's a joke. But and the Minnesota media was there, ready to, chomp at the bit to tear him a new one, I think. But anyway, 25,000 people showed up. The hangar was completely filled. The overflow was way out. They had to walk a mile, some of these people, just to get there.
I was one of them guys.
Yeah, were you?
It was more than a mile.
Well, I have my disability sticker, so I got a special spot to it in the park. So, yeah, in the election, and I can't remember who I said this to earlier, but you have to factor in Minnesota because this is the way it is. 4% for voter fraud. 4%. I know I did a lot of work on that score a while back. I actually brought Fox News in here, persuaded them for 10 months to come in here to do their own investigation about voter fraud, which they did, and they found he's right. In fact, I was a little short on my numbers. So he loses Minnesota by 1.5%, which means he won in Minnesota. And he was just up in Duluth a while back, and there's 10,000 people there. My guess is, I think instinctively, Minnesotans know there's something wrong, they just don't know what that is. They got an itch they can't scratch. And they're starting to act on it. And if they act in their own self-interest and self-defense, and I've said this to a crowd in St. Cloud, I said, look, all gray hair, white hair people. And I looked at them, I said, I said, how many people by a show of hands have children? Oh, the hands flew up. I said, how about grandchildren? Hands flew up again. He said, that's who you're fighting for. I've led a blessed life. I should have been dead years ago, and that's no kidding. But I went this way versus that way. My claim to fame in this life is, yeah, I survived basic training for 14 years as a kid, and I also knocked Bruce Springsteen out with a fastball during baseball practice back in Jersey. The guy could never pay attention, even now. And my buddies, especially my backup catcher, and I was the catcher, by the way, pitching. Go figure. So anyway, my backup catcher, Wayne Mancini, when I go back, he says, you know, it's your fault. Everything that comes out of Bruce's mouth is your fault, because you knocked him flat on his butt because he never paid attention, couldn't catch a cold in the outfield. But I'm just, I guess what I'm saying to you is, this is, you know, it's not about me. None of this is about me. I'm not that important. What is important are your kids, your grandkids, and your state, and my children also. And I said this to Mayor Kleiss, up close and personal. I said, if anything ever happened to one of my children or grandchildren because of this kind of malfeasance and betrayal of the public trust, there'd be no measure to my resolve to deal with that issue.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? If you let somebody go in there for 60 days, we're saying hello on the 61st day. How you doing? I won't put up with it. I'm not going to stand by when one of my children or grandchildren are hurt. When my kids, my daughter and my son-in-law, who I love dearly, like my own son, remember when we met, I shook his hand when they were 16, wouldn't let it go, and tried to pull away. How you doing? Just want you to know, I love my daughter. Oh yeah, okay. We're gonna try it again. Just want you to know how much I love my daughter. Oh yeah, okay. Third time was the charm. He said, okay, Mr. Carrillo. Okay, we're on. Have her home by 10 o'clock. I love my kids and grandkids, and I have great friends here. And everybody has to step up and do what they can to be a part of the solution, not the problem. And with that, I quit unless you have another question.
Dave, question there when you bring up that town member. You know, I was up at the rally up at Duluth for Trump and the rally down here in Rochester. And it seems like Trump loves the man.
Not so, I don't
Did he
think,
know or? Okay.
I went to the convention as a delegate.
Yeah.
And Tom is hearing footsteps. He stood up there and made the most incredible speech. It was anger on a Friday morning, and I could tell he was talking right to me. We don't have to like each other. You know, he was just barking at people.
Okay.
He knows what he has done. He created the Somali caucus.
Right.
He supports remittances, the Hawala business.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't give a rip about all the money that's been stolen. He says that, oh, that's not my job. He supports the Cuban, the lifting of the Cuban embargo. Was he nuts? He thinks the Castro brothers are dead? Not so much.
He was kind of a hypocrite.
Yep, not kind of. You can scratch the kind of. Tom has sold out.
Okay.
And then the George Soros thing. And it's a sad state of affairs. please vote for Doug Wardlow. I'm not telling you what to do, but please. And Mr. Howe for Secretary of State, the guy's brilliant and he's got guts. I like that. He's smart. And gosh, who else? Oh, Karen Housley, much better candidate, and Jeff Johnson also. I'm sorry.
Well, we should have pushed for Jim Newberger.
Oh, Jim, I forgot. Jim Newberger, I interviewed him on 4 segments. They're out there on YouTube through Third Rail Talk. And by the way, some of you have this piece, some of you don't, I don't know. But look, you know, I'm really horrible at asking people, not just to pass the plate, but if you're so disposed, there's a way for you to contribute to Third Rail Talk. Mainstream media has abandoned the field of play. That's why we're doing what we're doing, reporting on these stories. We're taking their place. I said that to the news director at Channel 9. She didn't like it very much. I also pointed out that Tom Lydon and she and the station committed fraud when they put that piece up with my face on it. So anyway, listen, and remember this guy? Remember this guy.
Thank you.
Near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. Number one, I was born there, Fort Bragg. Number two, he gave his life as a hero serving his country. And Minnesota taxpayer dollars inadvertently paid for his death. So remember that name. Thank you.
Okay, before you guys go, I've got something for you. We're just talking about that STEM system, where they're taking over the school. They're also taking over the Christian college. Are you wondering how this is all happening? I bought this out of my own company. It's a new book by Robert Spencer. It's a small one. It's called Reading, Writing, and Jihading. It'll make you see what goes on in kindergarten through high school. So y'all get one before you go. So get one off me, okay?
Last week's Trevor Loudon video is available, and I'll be sending it to everybody a link. If we could have a blessing from somebody who feels led. Sure.
We're gonna turn the lights out and turn your light on, because that's what we're called to do, is to be a light unto the world. Be a light unto the world. And Father, we just thank you that we've got a man that's got a lot of passion, that you give him protection, give him provision. And Father, till we gather again, may our light shine in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. You want to keep one?
You're making it. We're so fortunate.
Oh, by the way, before you leave, anybody remember this, guys? I remember. Give me John Blaine.
I see your tracks around.
I gotta make her get through.
It's a good book. Like you read this short, it makes you study.
Sorry.
Guys, that's the west side, so we
Walk that mile to see Trump. Well, not for me, because I think
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
This is still